After a troubling start to the season, Chelsea now look set to finish the 23-24 campaign in good spirits under Mauricio Pochettino. Since the turn of the year, only 4 clubs have picked up more points in the Premier League than the London club, and in their last 10 league games, only Manchester City and Arsenal have put more points on the board. Now, more than ever, it seems as though Pochettino will stay put at Stamford Bridge next season and get the time he's craved to build a formidable team out of the squad of raw but very talented young players. However, while Chelsea have seemingly got their act together and now look like a team that know what they're doing on the pitch, there's still one aspect of this team that presents a glaring problem, and one that Pochettino will have to fix next season if he's to get the club back into the top 4. This issue becomes apparent when we look at Chelsea's stats for this season. So far in the 23-24 campaign, the London club have the third highest XG from open play in the division, behind only Liverpool and Manchester City, and slightly above Tottenham and Arsenal. However, when we flip that around and look at which clubs concede the most XG from open play in the Premier League this season, we find that Pochettino's side only have the 8th best record in the division, and the amount of actual goals they're conceding from open play this season is the 7th worst in the league. This, clearly, is the unhelpful anchor that has kept Chelsea tied to the mid-table for much of this season. Pochettino's side may be able to score goals as well as just about any other team in the division, but they remain distinctly average when it comes to stopping opposition sides from creating chances against them. At this point, it may make sense to blame the goalkeeper or the ever-changing nature of Chelsea's defence, but I'm inclined to suggest that Pochettino's problems are actually down to the lack of a bona fide defensive midfielder in this team. Alongside the aforementioned poor defensive stats, Pochettino's team also have conceded the joint 6th most dribbles into their own box this season. And when it comes to fewest dribbles into their final third by opposing players, they sit 7th in the league. In other words, there are gaps between midfield and defence, and it's holding Chelsea back. Of course, the club do have some outstanding centre midfielders in Enzo Fernandez, Moises Caicedo and Conor Gallagher, and each of them has probably been labelled as a defence midfielder at some point in the past, but each of the aforementioned trio has struggled to fit into that role for Pochettino this season. Let's start with the most obvious candidate for the job, Moises Caicedo. Although the Ecuadorian has looked far better in recent weeks, his stats for the season still point to a player that has struggled with the defensive aspect of his role in midfield. As we can see from the graph, which shows defensive duels and interceptions per 90 minutes for central midfielders in the Premier League this season, Caicedo is far from excelling at either of them. However, what's worth noting here is that Caicedo was never an out-and-out defensive player. When we take a look at his radar from last season, in pink, and his radar from this season, in blue, we can see that while his defensive actions have dropped from one season to the next, they were never at a particularly high level to begin with. The Brighton star was certainly handy for making crucial interceptions or tackles, but he always had another holding midfielder alongside him, such as Billy Gilmore or Pascal Gross. Now he's been tasked with being the last line of defence in Chelsea's midfield. It's not really a role that he should ever been signed to do in Pochettino's team. Much the same can be said of Enzo Fernandez, more or less signed off the back of a fantastic campaign for Argentina in the 22 World Cup. The midfielder shot to fame for being an all-round box-to-box star. Again, like Caicedo, Fernandez is perfectly capable of getting stuck in with a tackle or interception, but certainly isn't a specialised defence midfielder. In his single season at Benfica, Fernandez ranked 9th in Roger Schmidt's squad for interceptions and tackles. And since then, his average has dropped by around 24% from 3.57 per 90 to 2.73 per 90 for Chelsea this season. Again, like Caicedo, Fernandez is an outstanding centre midfielder, but he's not a holding defensive player capable of protecting a backline. Interestingly enough, Conor Gallagher has shown an ability to play as a defensive midfielder and currently sits top of Chelsea's table for tackles and interceptions in the Premier League this season. However, the England midfielder is also second in Pochettino's squad for key passes, second for assists, 4th for passes into the penalty box, and 4th for total goals scored. So asking the 24-year-old to play as a defensive midfielder would undoubtedly limit what Gallagher has so obviously brought to Chelsea in an attacking sense this season. Considering the sheer scale of Chelsea's first-team squad, it should come as no surprise to learn that Pochettino may already have a long-term solution to his problems on the books at Stamford Bridge. Romeo Lavia, signed from Southampton for €62 million last summer, has missed this entire season through injury, but may be the defensive midfielder Chelsea desperately need. When we overlay Lavia's last full season with the Saints in pink, with Fernandez in purple, Caicedo in yellow and Gallagher in green from this season, We can see that his defensive stats are undoubtedly a level above the aforementioned trio. The club also have Leslie Okochoko, another recent signing who has been injured this season, who may well blossom into a fantastic defensive midfielder next season. However, what these two young players promise on paper and what they can deliver in real life remain two very different things for now. And whether Pochettino finds a way to fit either one of them into his side without compromising on his current setup remains to be seen. Chelsea seem to have turned a corner under Pochettino, and fans can finally be hopeful for next season. But this team is far from the finished article, and if the Argentine coach wants to get back to challenging for serious silverware, he may well need to plug that whole midfield before the start of next season.